or a gentle breeze. But hope here is a sturdy lass, standing right beside me with muck under her nails and grit in her hair, a hell-bent look in her dark, steely eyes that never flinched, even when the storms rolled in. That is the kind of hope that we're talking about in the subtitle. And I think that's the kind of hope that we're also trying to build in this resource for Justice Futures. Um, Thanks, Fern. So the project started, as I said, of a study of how and why violence reduced in Scotland over the years 2005 to 2015, sort of between the goalposts on that slide there. As you can see, a really significant and sustained reduction in violence, not only in police recorded crime, but also victimisation survey data and hospital admissions. We also saw like a really significant shift in um, the kind of the story of Glasgow and the story of Scotland from a time in 2005 when you couldn't move for stories about Glasgow and Scotland as being violent places to fast forwarding to the year 2018 where Glasgow is being held out as a model for cutting crime. So that was really the focal point of the project. And as I said, we draw on the work of Pierre Bourdieu here in the way that he talks about a symbolic revolution, where the kind of the way that the words we use to describe things and the culture that surrounds that starts to judder and shake and comes down somewhere else. That period in 2005 of crisis when the established order seesaws and the whole future is suspended, where, as I say, there was space for alternative voices to emerge. And it was a success story that was so powerful that it prompted a wider conversation on public health approaches to violence reduction, first in England and Wales in the formation of 20 violence reduction units there, and now more recently in Australia, where they're developing a violence reduction unit explicitly on the Scottish model. Um, but just as we were interviewing people about violence reduction and this sort of positive success story of hope and transformation, a 14-year-old boy tragically lost his life at the hands of a 15-year-old boy in Glasgow. And it transpired that it had come about as a result of a resurgence of violence involving young people through the filter of social media during the pandemic. And I think it's fair to say it marked a major turning point in the research, as in as much as we continued to look between the goalposts at violence reduction, we also started looking right of the goalposts, that line that's sort of slowly but surely creeping up and has continued to. Fern, could you switch on to the next slide? Yeah. Um, so yeah, we quickly learned as we started to ask people about this. We asked people that are working on the front lines of the COVID aftermath with young people. That was teachers, youth workers, community groups, and of course, young people themselves. That there were deep concerns with what had happened when young people had been left to their own devices. Our most valued teachers, though, in this part of the research, were a group of young men affected by violence who call themselves the wise men. They let us into their lives and slowly told us their stories. Rather than approaching these wise men as research participants, though, from the start we wanted to turn the tables and create space for them to be the teachers rather than the pupils. And with Fern at their side, they've done all kinds of amazing things that you'll hear about in just a moment. One of the lessons they taught us, though, was about the connected nature of violence in their lives. We came to think about it through this concept of triple violence, violence upon, within, and among. The violence among young people is perhaps the most visible sign of violence involving young people. That's on-street violence, maybe involving gang-affiliated young people, kind of visible forms of violent conflict. But we heard time and again from young people in Glasgow and London about violence upon. That is violence that comes from the systemic weight of social and economic disadvantage, be it in the form of inequality, housing insecurity, criminal justice involvement, school exclusion, racism, police violence. We heard time and again of these forms of structural or systemic violence that weigh down on young people. And we also heard about violence within. We heard about ever increasing rates of anxiety and the fears of social workers and teachers about the levels of anxiety among young people and its impact on stress, mental health issues, and so on. So only by understanding all three forms of violence, I think, can we start to consider the causes of the violence among. So that's one of the lessons from the wise men. We're here today to talk about this idea of justice futures, and we've tried to incorporate the idea of the future a few times throughout this talk, and especially future from the perspective of young people. Um, the world of triple violence is a bleak one, but the lessons in the school of the wise men didn't stop there. As Fern will tell you, there was a lot of joy, a lot of laughter, a lot of crack in the work that they did together. And in the book, we tried to capture a little bit of this in a series of vignettes documenting Fern's time with the wise men, written as like little short stories interspersed throughout the book. And I think Fern might if you're lucky, read a few of these excerpts. But I think one of the holding these two things together in our minds of that kind of the bleakness of triple violence and the hope of something different, I think that's one of the great gifts that the wise men have given us, the ability to think about these two things at the same time. That in the words of my colleague Les Back, that it's possible to imagine both taking in and living with the trouble, the damage, and the wreckage at the same time as maintaining an attentiveness to what is emerging in the conditions of the present as they're carried into the future. Or, as one of the wise men put it more pithily, there's hope, aye. Uh, in the poem that I read at the start, uh, hope. I think that's the kind of hope that Les is talking about here and the wise men's talking about too. Something that is based in the world as it is and the realities of violence for young people today, but is able to see the green shoots of hope and transformation in the present and work towards that kind of shoulder to shoulder. That is hope's work. As I say, it's in the poem that I read. It's in these quotes, it's in the work that Fern has done with the wise men, and it's all around us too, in the work of frontline youth workers and teachers and colleagues within SECJR. It's also, I should say, there and as the inspiration for the podcast Young Warriors, that's part of this resource too, that I spent a year of my life making with transformative youth organisations up and down the country, hearing from young people that had seen a lot of life but were making really incredible transformative impacts on their communities and wider societies. So that, I think, that is Hope's work. And if we're looking for something called Justice Futures, I think that's not a bad place to start. And so with that, I'll pass over to Fern. And also, just before Fern starts, I wanted to give a huge thank you to Rachel Cobain for all of her incredible and invaluable assistance with creating the resource and beyond. That is very much Hope's work too. So over to you, Fern. Thank you.
Thanks, Ali. Yeah, and totally to echo, thanks to Rachel as well. Like we couldn't have got this out in the world without you. So thank you very much. Yeah, I'm going to talk about the work that the wise men did in producing and creating a youth work resource. And I think thanks is a good place to start. So I want to start with thanking Lisa, first of all, who you will meet at the end of the presentation. Lisa has been a huge support to the Wise Men and to this project from within school. And without her support, we couldn't have done what we've done with the group. And I think hearing from her and her insights from that kind of education perspective will be really valuable later on. But I will also want to say a huge thanks to everyone else who contributed to the resource. The wise men got to work with some amazing creative colleagues in film, music, immersive technologies, writers, artists. I mean, the list goes on. Um, I want to thank everyone who took part in the resource through sharing their own stories and experiences and giving their time. Those who gave us little bits of money and supported us to actually do the work, And very often we were partnering with other organisations, the VRU, Action for Children, and so on, to help make it come to life. And also to those who came forward with other opportunities for the group to get involved in Celtic Foundation, Glasgow Life, SWG3, just giving us like some great days out and great opportunities. When I was trying to think of everyone to thank, the list would have went on for the full hour. So if you've not been named specifically, I'm really sorry, but I want to say that the experiences and the interactions that you've had with the wise men over the course of the years and making this resource have been really, really impactful on them, and I know they are all very grateful. So then obviously I need to get to the next elephant in the room. Where are the wise men? I'm pretty sure that's who you all came to hear from, not Ali and I. And yeah, I guess this is what we need to address. In short, they've moved on to bigger and better things. So when I met the wise men, as you'll hear in a bit, they were kind of 12, 13, 14 years old. They were young in age, but they were dealing with some pretty heavy issues, grief, parenthood, addictions, mental health. And now, years later, this has been years of work. The baby of the group's just turned 18, so we're years down the line. So I have kind of regular contact with one of the wise men. The others just check in from time to time, usually if they need something, but also like recently they reached out to congratulate me on some good news that I had. And like it just makes me think that's kind of how relationships work. That's how colleagues keep in touch over years and how friendships work. So I guess they're not here today because they've moved on. Life can still be messy, but they are busy being dads, working, and in college. So I guess they're not here because they've got better things to do. But we'll certainly feed back today about how it's went and what you thought of the resource. But I guess them not being here does touch on a broader issue, and I'm not skirting away from that. And again, in the chat at the end, very happy to open up the discussion about doing co-production with young people, and just talking about how complex it really is, and that it opens up issues of ethics and ownership and authentic voice. And these are all things that over the years I've contemplated and really wrestled with in the work that we've done. But I guess the point that I want to get across is this isn't us speaking for others. When I talk about the work we do, I do it with real care, and I feel like we're sharing our story. And I hope that the parts and the materials that we're showing today, and the kind of different aspects of the work we've done together are received that way too, with real care as well. So before we introduce the resource, I'm going to start off with one of the excerpts from the book that Ali talked about, the little vignettes. So this one is called In the Science Room. We first met in the science room at school. Ali had been in a few weeks before, sitting on a session with your youth worker. There were more of you then, 10, maybe 12. So many of you, they had to split you into groups to try and keep the peace. Before meeting you, I knew you'd been through a lot. You were 14 and had just lost a close friend. How could that not have an impact? I'd brought all the things I'd usually bring to meet a new group: crisps, cans of juice, a football, things that might break the ice and make you feel comfortable. I didn't have a clear idea of what we were doing. All I knew that you were in need and I wanted to do what I could. You swaggered in, half-arsed, another adult coming to talk to us. You probably thought, just what we need. One of you had your hood right up, cords pulled tight to your face. Another just had a pure attitude like, I'm not doing this shit. Eyes hard, telling me in no uncertain terms to fuck right off. I remember thinking, you and me are not going to get on, which is funny because we ended up getting along just fine. You were the youngest, and that probably had something to do with it. I remember sitting in the empty science room after all the tables were mixed up, just amazed. When I left, I was buzzing. I knew there was something there, something special. But I remember thinking, fuck, I'm really going to need to pull something magic out the bag to get used to open up and to trust me. So that was the first time I met the wise men. Um, and I guess to start off, the intention was never to make a youth work resource. We had a little bit of money to work with a filmmaker to produce something for the website, and I convinced Ali to let me use it with the boys. And I pitched it to them as a way for them to tell their story. So they did. We made a film together, and we wanted to celebrate what the boys had done, and we showed it to some other youth groups, to some other adults. And what the feedback was that it was it was just amazing, really, that there was real utility in the film, and youth workers and youth practitioners were asking if they could use it with their groups of young people. There was nothing else they out there that they could kind of use. And that's when we started thinking and suggested to the group that they could use their experiences to make materials that could be used by other young people. I'd say as well, another main kind of focus of this work was keeping the group together because we felt we could see a benefit in their engagement. And we'll pick this up later on at the end. So together we hope that the resource can generate open and curious and respectful conversations with young people. So now I'm going to talk you through a couple of the resources in the pack and show you some clips. Before I do that, I'm just going to read another short excerpt, which is called On the Move. And this is the kind of lead up to us making the first film. Every time I get in the car now, I can't help but think of you. You've been in and connected to my Bluetooth so many times, all your daft names pop up every time I start the car. Honestly, some of the best memories I have with you are from the car. Being in the car together also meant showing up for you, like literally. Saying I'd be there at the door at a certain time and then actually being there. But it also meant yous holding one another to account on the WhatsApp group, like, are you ready? Where are you? We're waiting. And then off we'd go to the studio or to go-karting or to any of the mad places we ended up. With a stop off for a McDonald's or to buy vapes. It was when we were making the first film that I realised how much it all meant. I love that film. It starts with your hairy knees and white trainers walking up a set of steps. You're like, what's going on here? But then the camera pans up and you're at the top of Glasgow, looking out across the full city like you're kings. It's poignant too because it's also a graveyard. You can see the gravestones all around you as you look over the city. And thinking about it now, death has been close by the whole time I've known you. Not always talked about, but they're like those headstones. So Ali, now if you can show the hairy knees of the first film. This is what we affectionately call the OG film. It's the first film the wise men made. They shot the film, they interviewed people who had experience of violence, and they also made their own contributions. So the film, sorry, Ali. The film covers the four Fs: fighting, Friday night, friends, and the future. And the intention then is that facilitators can use the four Fs that are explored in the film to prompt discussions. So, you know, what are people saying in the film about the four Fs? How does it relate to your experiences? And how can adults support you around the four Fs? So Ali's going to show you some of the four Fs now.
This film was made by a group of boys affected by violence. They shot film, told stories and interviewed others with experience of violence.
Where did I think I would end up when I was younger? I didn't really think much about like what type of job I would have or if I'd end up in prison.
I was football in the mindset, so I was drilled in football, going to be a footballer, but that's not the way it really works.
I didn't really see any paths into employment or education, so jail probably seemed like the only option at that point. Thankfully that's not the case.
The area I grew up in had quite a lot of poverty. It was quite violent. There was quite a lot of people on drugs openly in the street, injecting heroin in stairways.
I was like the youngest boy, so I looked up to my cousins who were into everything, like gang fighting, dirt bikes. It was pretty mental, but it was just the areas, I suppose.
There was a lot of violence. There was a lot of violence between us as one gang and amongst us when we've all drank too much and ended up knocking lumps at each other. And then there was a lot of fighting with all the schemes round about as well.
You get put on it and then you start arguing or Snapchat.
Two false schemes going at it, man, telling them we're going to kill each other and all that.
I got chop fuck at you, man.
It's no good to them.
It's not even, it's frightening a bit.
Probably off a different scheme.
Cunts end up boxing, but now mostly cunts use tools now. And all goes south dead quickly.
So when the wise men are here, they usually do a disclaimer about the expletives in it. So yeah, apologies.
So it's not it won't change for them.
A lot of my family members, including myself, have been victims of violence as well as perpetrators. Knowing the people having to go and visit family members in hospital and the sort of ripple effect, like what my actions were then, yeah, it's something that I'm definitely not particularly proud of, and something that if I could go back, I wish there was like more services and stuff that helped get people, steer people away from that. We were kind of left to our own devices back then.
If I was to go right now and set up something for a group of young people to see how we could help them, first port of call is go and speak to them, find out what they want, find out what help they think they need, find out what help looks like for them, and then try and make that happen with them. There's no point in, as adults, us trying to tell young people what they need and what they want. So I think we need to give young people the power to say, this is what I want, this is what I need, and I need you to help me get it.
In the future, if I had the chance to, when I started now, if I had the chance to move away from it, I would. Wouldn't be the way I was and wouldn't be the way it is with all different schemes and all that.
I would move to the countryside of Scotland, man, the Royal Hills and all that, out the way for everybody, man. Brian currently.
Thanks, Ali. So yeah, I think you'll agree, like it's a really professional looking film. And like the resources can be used in tandem. So we've got a rap music video from London, so you can compare the issues that are being discussed in this film to the issues that are explored in the rap in London. Hopefully none of the participants in that video are on the call, but some of them are a bit older. So, you know, you can talk about how has violence changed over time? Has it changed over time? So you can use the resources quite creatively. And I guess when we were creating them, we didn't really have a group in mind. So if, you know, you're working with a group of young people and they're having issues with fighting on a Friday night with their friends, then ideal. But similarly, we kind of piloted it with more general groups, you know, modern studies groups, where they're exploring issues of crime and justice and violence. And I think it's like a really contemporary prompt for kind of wider exploration of these broader issues. Then to link to a kind of second element of the resource, the boys again turned to filmmaking and they interviewed award-winning author Graham Armstrong. We're going to show you a wee clip in a second, but again, they did all the camera work, the lighting, the sound, and they devised the questions that they interviewed Graham with. So Ali, if you want to do the first clip.
My name's Graham Armstrong. I'm an author for Airdrie. I wrote a book called The Young Team, and I spent my teenage years involved with young team gang culture.
We're here to ask you a few questions about how you grew up with gang violence, how it affected you and those around you.
So, yeah, like I say, the boys devised the questions, and we're going to hear from Graham a little bit later, but it's probably not an interview style that he's used to. The wise men really tested Graham on his young team credentials, but he was able to really skillfully answer their questions about what drugs did you used to take, you know, have you ever been done in, all that kind of stuff, and turn it into a real story of change and identifying the kind of key turning points in his story. So the suggested activities for this element of the resource, we really lean into storytelling. So we ask people to listen to Graham's story and identify the turning points. They could maybe write their own stories of change, and also kind of prompt us to think about how stories are told about young people in different formats. At the end of the resource, Graham turns the tables on the wise men and asks them a few questions.
The generation, right, he's are bombarded with COVID, with cost of living, right? Do you think there's hope for a job or for a career?
I would say there's hope, aye, but there's no, but it's no hope as if you want to be where you want to be, you need to push for it, you need to try. You can't just sit back and not try and complain about what's going on about you. If you want to get out, you need to make sure you get out yourself and don't rely on anybody else.
What's the future hold for you boys?
Hoping to get myself a good job, a good paying job, nice family and that, just not involved in violence. I can go wherever I want if it didn't happen to me or any of my family members.
I just take a job in that so I can provide for my parents.
Well, you just go to it, just get away with it.
It's weird there, because you ask boys that are involved in a street life and they just say exactly the same things as everybody else. They want a job, a car, a family. No unreasonable, is it? No, but it's more difficult for boys like us to access that, isn't it?
We went to school and that, like, got kicked in fourth year, got shipped off to college and we hated it. Obviously me and him were lucky enough, we got back into school, but they two weren't lucky enough to get back in. We got back in and we're trying, but the school and all the school system's just a bit fucked, I don't know.
See, when you are involved in projects like this, I don't know if you realise how important that is for the next generation, because you boys are becoming change makers, you know that? You should be proud of what you've achieved with this, by the way, because young people are in that cusp, they're just getting into the life that we know, right? I remember it being where you are, right? They don't know what's ahead, so honestly, just what I say, you should be proud of yourselves for doing that.
So obviously we've showed clips of two films, but the wise men ventured into other art forms, including music. So like I said, rap music as well in the resource. And then we also went and designed a board game, which I'll try and... Now you've seen Graham using the board game at the end of that clip. So the board game was aimed at younger children. So this was when the boys really got into that kind of preventative space and what would have helped them at an earlier point in their lives. And we kind of fell on snakes and ladders, and the boys took a really interesting, deeply philosophical kind of approach to snakes and ladders. So yeah, you can land on ladders and you get opportunities, but they were very clear that opportunities aren't just handed out to you. You need to earn them. So as well as playing snakes and ladders, the game has a number of discussion cards that when you fall on certain parts of the board, you have to pick up these cards, and they prompt discussions with the adults who are supporting you. So like I say, the ladders are about opportunities and how you get opportunities and who can support you to meet the goals that you want to meet. And likewise, you can land on snakes, and snake scenarios are some of the kind of dilemmas that young people face in everyday kind of street life. And again, sometimes snake scenarios end up in something negative happening and you fall back down the board, but sometimes it's a game of chance. Sometimes you can get in sticky situations and get away with it. So again, all these kind of real life aspects are built into the game. You have card charges as well. So these were all scenarios that the boys had faced where they get into trouble with the law. And again, it was an opportunity to explore with the adults playing the game with them, things they could have done differently, or explore the implications of getting a charge and how that would impact them going forward. So the board game's obviously like an offline resource, and we do have a kind of limited number of prototypes, but we are trying to commercialise the board game. So if you're interested in having a wee play of it, then do get in touch and I will try to get what is a very large board game to you. And then finally, the podcast that Ali mentioned, Young Warriors, the wise men handed the mantle on to the young wise men, their youngers, who have been carrying on the work with the resource, in particular the board game, but also they had the opportunity to contribute to Ali's podcast, Young Warriors. So the podcast takes us across the UK, hearing from young people and youth practitioners about the healing power of rap lyrics, communities built on food, unlikely stories about grannies knitting gang jumpers, and much, much more. But really, Young Warriors tells the stories of hope. It's about young people who are not only transforming their own lives, but they're being given a platform to transform the communities that they are part of, to transform the systems that have excluded them and are keeping them on the outs. So the bonus episode hands the mic over to the young wise men, quite literally. They did all the recording, they did all the interviews, they did the first edit, they gave feedback on the production, and they even star as the cover image. They made their episode about school, something that featured very heavily in our research, and the intersection between school exclusion and offending is well known. So in the episode, the young wise men talk about the difference between primary school and secondary school, their experiences of school now, and the opportunities that they've had through school to engage in other type of learning and what they like about that more participatory approach. So I'll hopefully be able to let you listen to a short clip.
Fern spoke to us about what we liked and don't like about school.
What makes a good teacher?
Probably just like a teacher that listens and like just helps you and stuff like that with the work, and just like pat you all the time and stuff like that.
When you're in school, how does it make you feel?
What do you mean?
Like, do you enjoy being in school?
It's alright.
What's the best thing about school?
And sometimes you can get like a laugh and stuff like that. You get to see like your pals and stuff like that. Because it's like better in the house, because you always like people get bored and everything when you're in and don't do it.
What's the worst thing about school?
Just getting told what to do. I don't really like getting told what to do.
Can you describe school in 3 words?
Shite, good and funny.
They're good. That was really good. What do you think about having to wear a school uniform?
Nah, I don't like it. It's like uncomfortable and it just something. Just like to be comfy in my own clothes.
Just flinging us in that wee room.
Fern spoke to us about what we like.
So I think probably most people can agree with the sentiment of I don't like getting told what to do. I think that's maybe why I've got such an affinity with young people. But finally, in the research, research and throughout the resource, we hear in multiple spaces and in multiple ways the importance of trusted adults and safe spaces, whether they be in our schools, in our communities, in our families. But I think the journey with the wise men shows that research can be a safe space too. And I think through working with them, it stresses some of the fundamentals, or whether it's co-producing research or youth work or education spaces. We hear about the importance of time, trust, and voice. And this is some of the stuff that one of the wise men tells a colleague of mine when he's been interviewed about being involved in co-production and the lessons that you can learn. But before we hear from him and kind of end with the wise men, I just wanted to read a final excerpt. So this is from the section called There's Hope, Aye. Hearing how much you've all been through, I wonder sometimes how you manage to keep going. And not just keep going, but stay funny, kind, and caring. You'll hate me saying this, but you all inspire me and give me hope. I've been watching all the films you've made these last few days, and I've noticed that you talk about hope as well. My proudest moment in our whole journey was when you presented all your work in front of the whole school and teachers. You each stood up and introduced one thing, the film, the rap, the board game, and the feeling in the room was unbelievable. The work is all amazing and everyone loved it, but even more important was you all standing up and owning it. The last film I watched, it was more recent. One of you was being interviewed about our work together. I hadn't heard you talk about it in this way before. He asks what advice you'd give to folk working with young people, and you say, show them time and show them love. So we'll hand over to the wise men now for them to tell us some of their lessons.
About as well though, what was the group that you did with Fern or that project? What was the hardest bit about it for you?
But the wise men?
Mm-hmm.
No. I don't really think one.
No. Let's imagine you're giving advice to somebody who's wanting to set up a group. So what skills or knowledge, what is it about that person that would make them a good worker?
What would make them a good worker?
Aye.
To show people time. What, show people time, give them time, let them think. What, just, everything to do with that, man. Because you can't work with somebody that's know what to, know what I mean? Somebody doesn't want to work with you, man, you need to, it's common sense.
So, thinking back to the people that you worked with in the past, what have they done?
But the people I work with, they gave me time, they let me think, no, they didn't rush us through stuff or anything like that. Like they let the boys in the group and that do that as well. Know what I mean? So they gave us time, let us think what we got to do and all that. But they didn't make us do it, they asked us and we done it. Know what I mean? They didn't put words in our mouth for it. But they asked us stuff, they asked us what we wanted to do that and they helped us through it. Know what I mean?
That's great.
That's good, man.
Anything else? About as well. That you did with Fern and other people. That you did with. What was it that made you keep coming back to the group every single week?
She also, as my pal passed away, right? Shit was hard, man. So obviously, but she has I escaped that, I was got to that group, so it helped me do that. Know what I mean? And then every time you went and kept going and going and going and going, and just they made shit better all the time. But I would go to like, obviously I was like 10% man, and then every time I went to the group it just went up and up and up and up, know what I mean? So it was good, man, aye.
That was nice. That's nice to hear that what you were getting out of that group.
Aye, it was, that made a very big impact, man.
Yeah.
Therefore.
I can see that in the look in your face.
No, it did, but man, therefore.
So I think today we've tried to cover a bit about the resource and what's in it, a bit about how it was made and something about the co-production journey that we've been on. and also kind of link it to the wider research. So I hope that there's been something in there for everyone. I wondered now if now would be a good time to bring Lisa in, if she is on the call. Lisa.
Hello. Hello. I don't know how to say anything. I'm pure emotional just watching the journey, so bear with me.
Do you want to just talk a bit about the journey then, and a bit about how issues in the community come into school, and a bit about how you see the resource being used?
Yeah, I think this was kind of new to us, where we had experienced a group of young boys who were, I don't really like to use the term united by grief, but that's kind of where it was. And that had a huge impact on not just the community around us, but various communities around us, and massively within our school. When this kind of all started to raise its head again, we're a school in the East End of Glasgow, and violence has been a very hot topic for a lot of our young people's families. It's been ingrained in a lot of their life. It's been a lot of experiences that members of their family have shared with them because it's the only experiences that they've had. But when that particular situation happened, we noticed there was a huge shift in our school and in our school community around concentrations, around fear, around, stereotypical things that people associate with the word violence. Now, none of these boys would I ever say are violent young men. They are fantastic, loving, strong, capable young men, but were really stereotyped by the word violence. They didn't know how to cope. We really didn't know how to support them in their grief. So they turned to addiction. So we were facing more and more challenges around their levels of being able to engage with that traditional school environment. We had younger people aspiring to be like them because they thought that was the future and that's what you should be like if you're in the East End of Glasgow. There was a massive uptake in social media presence, a lot of social media challenges. And one of the things that certainly there's lots of work to be done around was girls getting involved in that community-based entertainment of violence, if you like, luring boys from one area of the city to another area of the city because they were friends with a particular opposing gang that was then targeted as part of the kind of young boy losing his life and stuff. So it affected us all as a school community. It affected us, not directly involved with the young people, but everybody just had that element of unsettledness. There was no trust between the young people in school because they felt judged when they were here. There was no sense of our school values being demonstrated in how they are to the young people. We did lots to support them, but these young people, as are all young people, entitled to an education. And the education system, and I think one of them touched on it in part of the video, is it's not fit for purpose. We've got young men out there, and I think that's what they are. In that community, they are seen as men. And we're then as a school expecting these young people to come back in, put on a school uniform, and almost be talked at. They don't have a voice. They don't, it's almost that I'm the adult here and I know what I'm talking about. But yet these young men are dealing with a lot more adult situations than any of us ever have or would ever have to. And I think that's why this support has been fundamental in our learning, but could be transformational in the learning of not just young people, but staff as well. And I think there is that element of we come into our work, we drive by all the houses that are round about us, but don't really have much of a sense of what's going on in these areas at a deeper level. And I think for us, we always say to young people, education is a route out of poverty, but education doesn't need to be the education of you get 5 national 5s or hires or whatever to get yourself out of that. Education is about understanding what your pathway is, understanding what challenges you may face along the way that could impact you and could impact your journey to the future. And that's why I think this resource is key in doing that. I think it challenges the stereotypes. I think it gives schools a bit of an insight into real life scenarios. It takes that kind of a stigma away and gives the young people who are living these lives, living these situations day in, day out, the chance to feel normal, the chance to feel included, the chance to have a voice And I think that is it, a chance to understand what it means when they're hearing the words youth gang violence is on the rise, or East End of Glasgow is really, really high in crime, giving them a bit of an understanding about, actually, I understand this, but also here is my pathway out, here is my journey out of here. There is people willing to help me and not just write me off. And I think these young men come into this programme on a real heightened survival mode, and I think that was all it was. They didn't see a future, they didn't see support, they didn't see any form of self-worth. We talk about self-esteem in girls being at its all-time low. Girls don't see their worth in themselves, but I actually think it's really, really high in young men, and these young men are out there trying to find their place, and if all they know is you fight for survival in that real term, then that's all they're doing. And I think hopefully by having these resources that we can roll out across the city and hopefully beyond, we could really shape the future workforce. We could really make Glasgow a really positive, safe environment for young people to feel that they can travel freely across the city. And I think that is really, really important that we start it, but I think we really need to be looking at it at a young age. I think we really need to be getting exposure to these things. We're not saying that you should see hard-hitting violence videos. That's not what it's about, but it is giving young people, and I think it comes back to that feeling of hope, that feeling of belonging, that feeling of family, and that feeling of ambition, of I can actually do something. I think, Fern, you were fundamental in letting these young people experience new things. I mean, there are no young people who would naturally go into a university building. There are no young people who would even think for a minute that that's the sort of a line of work that they could aspire to get into. Even really, really things like going to the go-karting. That's not things that their families can afford to do. So if they've not got anything to do, these young people become bored and then get caught up in that cycle again. And I think that that's where that horizon's just been absolutely widened for these young people. And if it wasn't for yourself, Fern, I don't know where these young people would be. And that is honest. I really think I'm really grateful to Ali, because I know that we really ripped it with the word be Ali and time. If it was supposed to be a short programme, and here we are still very much working together. But that's what relationships are. And I feel that we're a real family, we're a real friendship. And it should be really nice to see, and I'm really grateful for that, and so excited that other young people will get this opportunity as well.
Yeah, thanks so much, Lisa, Ali and Fern. I mean, I'm just blown away. I mean, it's an incredible resource and so inspiring to hear, like, not just about how it might be used in practice, but that genesis and the development and all the care that's gone into that. I'm very aware that we now just have 5 minutes and we do need to finish prompt on 1 o'clock. So I wanted to just give people here a chance. I'm sure people will have lots of questions they want to ask. So if you'd like to ask a question, you're very welcome to pop that in the chat, or just use the react function to pop your hand up.
Just while people are gathering their thoughts, since Graham's here, I wonder if we could invite him just to share on a reflection or two as someone who has been through some of that trajectory that Lisa was just talking about, and has worked directly with the wise men and does a lot of work in schools. Yeah, Graham, I wondered if you had any just reflections on the resource, your work with the right wise men, or how it might be useful.
Honestly, just to echo what Lisa said, that out of the tragedy of a violent death of a young person comes this hopeful thing, and you could feel that hope, and it's not only the willingness of you guys to work with the young men, but also the warmth, and I could feel that trust relationship as soon as it was quite a sparse industrial space we were filming in, because it's the atmosphere of these places, but there was a real warmth, and you could see these boys were on that journey. And it's a journey I know about from my own life, that sense of hopelessness and despair, tragedy, but also sort of the mountain ahead. And I think you guys made the mountain just a little bit smaller, for these young people, and empowered them to not only just be the specimen, because lived experience often becomes a specimen, and it's poked and prodded, by many people, not just sociologists, you know. But they were in the driving seat for all of this. They were the interviewers, not the interviewees. So I love that, you know, and I feel emotional when I watch that wee film because they were the ones who were finding out what they wanted to about my life and working out and interrogating how that then fits into their life story, you know. And of course, the switch flips at the end, and it's me asking them. But you can feel that the hope and the hopelessness, you know, fighting against each other. So I think it was a brilliant opportunity to meet these young people. And worrying as well, you know, that I mean, they gave quite clear messages about violence in social media. So I think it's not the end of the story, that's for sure. But it was a good marker and a waypoint for them.
Thanks so much, Graham.
Thank you.
I can see that there's a question in the chat there about structural violence and whether there's any offshoot projects that might explore how to address these. I mean, like that. I mean, that came through just writ large across the whole project, and that's really where we tried to emphasize that idea of triple violence, that you don't get one without the other two, and that any time that you hear or read about violence in the streets and the media, you should always be thinking about these structural issues. Like how to actually handle them and respond to them. I'm not sure it needs more research. I think we really know what the structural drivers are of violence, both within and among young people. But how to actually address that is a larger question, and it's one perhaps for all of us. Fern, did you have any reflections on that? I realise we've only got 2 minutes left, so maybe you want
Yeah, just really briefly, like I think particularly, and I don't know what your background is, the person who asked that question, but particularly for us in universities, it's like how can we offer opportunities that are meaningful to the young people who are participating? So we're looking at commercialising the board game, and could the young people have a role in that, which leads to employment opportunities, which are things they can write on CVs. Lisa is amazing in the school, and anything that we're doing, she's like, that could tie in with their English, or, you know, if they do that, then is that them doing maths? And how can we tie in this co-production work that we're doing to kind of qualifications to get them qualifications and things like that? Like, that's just two really small examples of just trying to address some of the kind of structural barriers that they're kind of facing.
Okay. Fantastic. Well, I think we've pretty much come to time. So I just wanted to say thanks again to Fern, Ali, and all that have been involved in the project. It's been an absolute privilege to hear more about it. And I think it's a very fitting start to the seminar series on Justice Futures, starting on a note of hope. The Justice Futures, the current seminar series, will run monthly through till the end of June. And I see that Rachel has just posted in the chat some details of our next seminar, which will be held towards the end of March, and that is looking at living a feminist life. So there's information there, including how to find out more details about signing up for that. But for now, I'll say thanks everyone as well for your engagement, and again, thank you to our presenters.
Thanks, everyone.